right, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting a new chapter on natural selection and evolution. Last week, I posted a video talking about the difference between a theory and a hypothesis. That way, we don't have to worry about having that kind of argument. All right, I get that every year. People want to argue, say, I don't have to believe what you're telling me because it's just a theory. But if it was just a guess, which is what you meant to say, that's a hypothesis, and that's fine. You don't want to believe that, that's fine. But a theory is backed up by a whole bunch of facts, right? The theory is just what we came up with based on all of the actual facts, and those facts are what we're going to be talking about this chapter, right? The facts that lead up to that theory. And I like to start every chapter, as you know, with vocabulary. So let's jump into that. All right, so we are talking about natural selection and evolution. So our first word is going to be natural selection. A member of a species is better suited to survive and reproduce than another member of its species. That's your keystone definition. So let me simplify that. Out of everyone that lives around you, your traits are better. So you will survive. You will reproduce. That's it. That's what it comes down to. If your traits are better, you are more likely to survive, you are more likely to reproduce. That's it. The next generation will have your better genes. If your traits are not that good, then you probably won't pass on your genes, so they won't exist in the next generation. Right? So it's not about you, it's about the next generation. Do they or do they not have your genes? So it's not about being the strongest or anything like that. It's about surviving in your environment. That's going to be something I repeat a lot. In your environment. If your environment changes, your traits may not be that good anymore. Species. Organisms capable of reproduction that result in fertile offspring. All right, that's two things in there. They're able to reproduce, and their offspring is fertile, meaning the offspring can grow up and reproduce, right? Just because you can reproduce with something doesn't mean that's their same species. A common example is a mule. It's where you get a horse and a donkey to reproduce together. They're not the same species, but they can have a kid. That's called a mule. However, mules are not fertile, meaning you cannot get two mules in a room and get a baby mule out of the deal, right? They cannot have kids. Therefore, the horse and the donkey are not the same species. Same idea with ligers, which actually are real animals. If you get a lion and a tiger together, they could have a baby liger. However, you cannot get two ligers together and have a baby liger because ligers are not fertile. So the lion and the tiger are not the same species. Populations, a group of individuals of the same species living together, and I should probably add, and reproducing, all right? But that's, specified in the word species anyway. So a group of the same individuals in the same location. That's a population. Here in Philadelphia, we are a population of human beings in the Philadelphia area. We are not the same population as human beings in Los Angeles. Even though we're the same species, we don't live together, so we're not the same population. Variation, a difference from the recognized norm. It basically means we all look a little different, right? Someone could have 5, 6, 7, 8 kids, and those kids could all look slightly different from each other, right? No, they're not all identical. That's what we call variation. One of you has blue eyes, one of you has brown eyes, one of you is 5'10", the other is 5'7". Some of you are built bigger, some of you are built smaller. Those are variations. Natural selection plays off those variations, right? There's variation of traits. Out of all those different individuals, whose traits are better for this environment, right? Out of all these giraffes you see on the screen, who would survive better? Well, depends on what environment they're in. Now, all those different colors are based on camouflage, I would assume. So who would be better camouflaged in their environment. They would survive better. If you put them in a different environment, the rules would change. So it's all about their traits in their environment. Fitness, the ability for an organism to survive and reproduce in its environment. That word environment keeps coming up. Right? Fitness doesn't mean you're in better shape than someone, doesn't mean you're stronger. It simply means your traits match your environment better than someone else's. You are more likely to survive, you are more likely to reproduce. That's what fitness is. So when they say natural selection, another term for it is survival of the fittest, doesn't mean that you are stronger, faster, sexier, whatever. It means you survive better in your environment. The picture I have here is a cheetah. Cheetahs, their biggest trait is speed, right? So good, strong muscles, fast muscles, long legs, sharp claws that dig into the ground for traction, right? These are all things that help with speed. One of those I said was long legs. If your legs are longer, you get longer reach, you can cover more distance and go even faster. So you would think having the longest legs are going to be better. However, there's a weird thing in physics where the longer the bone is, the easier it is for the bone to break. So there's a possibility of being too long. So it's not about getting bigger and bigger, bigger. It's about what works best. In this case, the medium-sized bone is going to work best. Smaller, which isn't shown here, wouldn't be as fast. Speciation, the process resulting in new genetically distinct species. All right, so let's take this moth down here at the bottom. Right, this moth has a whole bunch of, not just one, it's a whole group of moths that look like this guy. And they get overpopulated and they decide to split off into two different environments. Two different environments, two different rules. In one environment, being a lighter color is more survivable. So the ones who are lighter color survive and pass on their genes, and the ones who are darker color die out and don't pass on their genes. So after a few generations, they all start looking like this. In a different environment with different rules, the ones with more orange color survives better. So they all start looking like this. And it doesn't have to be an even split. They could split differently. This guy, maybe a group, stays in the environment, so they all stay the same. One group then branches off to the orange area, one group later on branches off to the lighter area, and we get three different groups. Right? That's called speciation. The moment where they are so genetically different, we consider them a different species. Right? This is part of evolution. Right? The part of evolution, the very moment where we say, okay, Nat, you are now a different species. Evolution is not a moment. Evolution is the entire process in which a new species develops from a pre-existing species. All right, so we are actually seeing evolution in this picture where it's a gradual change. So from here to here is evolution. Speciation is an exact moment where we say, now you are a new species. So evolution is the whole overarching process of getting there, where one species, the whale, developed from a pre-existing species, whatever this guy is called. Notice that this looks to be a land animal, right? And then, for whatever reason, a group of that animal decided to go live out in the water, and through a whole bunch of, different traits being better for the water versus land, and probably a bunch of mutations along the way, and the mutations end up being a good thing, it gradually changed over thousands and thousands of years. And some of these guys, land bones, still do exist in the whale. I will get back to that in a bit. Right? In evolution and natural selection, we are going to have a couple different fields of study. Anatomical field study is pertaining to the structure, the anatomy of an organism, where we actually look at an animal's body and think, well, this bone looks like this bone looks like that, it kind of looks like this other animal's bone that does this. So we are comparing body parts. Physiological refers to the normal function of an organism. This animal's body part is meant to do this action. Going back to the whale, I said there were bones from this land animal. This guy has hip bones. Whales don't need hips, right? Hips are a leg thing. This guy doesn't have legs, but he still has those hip bones. So that's the anatomical study. We're going, hey, he has hip bones. That's weird. The physiological study is we go, well, what are hip bones for? They're for walking. Whales don't walk. Maybe an ancestor did walk. So that is, again, facts, he has hip bones. Facts, that's what hip bones are for. Theory, maybe he had an ancestor that used those hip bones. Well, those hip bones are what we call vestigial structures. Your keystone definition is an anatomical structure that has lost its function over the course of generations. Let's say that easier. Body parts you don't use anymore. All right? Your ancestors probably use them, you do not. Again, the whale has these hip bones where an ancestor probably had legs attached to them. You have a couple of vestigial structures yourself. Your appendix is a vestigial structure. It's an organ attached to your digestive system. We think that it was used to help you digest raw vegetation. Certain foods have way too much cellulose. We can't really break them down without cooking them. Right? Our ancestors didn't cook. So they had the appendix to create a chemical to help break down the cellulose, and we could eat it. Then there was a mutation where it didn't work anymore, but we didn't care because by then we were already cooking food with fire. So we got to survive, and that mutation stuck around. Now it is just sitting there doing nothing. Another vestigial structure, when you come back to me, hey guys, I'm back. All right, I'm trying to look really close. It's gonna be kind of disturbing, all right? I'm zooming in on my eyeball here. All right, you see that little pink area in the corner of my eye. All right. Well, yeah, in an earlier chapter, this is biology, right? So we didn't get my anatomy class. We talked about that there is a drain into your sinus cavity in there, so your tears can go into your nose and be fine. But also, the pink fleshiness, some scientists think are remains of a secondary eyelid. Again, this one is more of a hypothesis, but some scientists think that that is what's left over of an eyelid that went sideways across your eyeball. It was a clear eyelid. Alligators have this. Some fish, fish have it, but theirs doesn't open and close. Some reptiles like alligators, a lot of amphibians have a second eyelid that's clear and opens and shuts sideways and acts like biological goggles so you can see underwater. We don't have that. We don't need that, but some scientists think our ancestors did, so they may have lived underwater. All right, back to screen share. All right, now let's talk about some other kind of evidence, another field of biological study, embryological. All right, embryological study related to the study of the embryo and its development. What we're going to talk in more detail later on is that when we start off as embryos, we are pretty simple. We don't have too much going on in terms of body parts. So we look pretty simple, like in this picture. So does everything else. So when we look at embryos of different species, we all tend to look the same. Scientists tend to think, hey, that's kind of weird that us and a fish and a pig and whatever else, a bird, salamanders, we all tend to look the same in the beginning, earlier than this guy too. Like we all kind of start off developing the exact same way, and then later on start developing our differences. So why do all these weird different things all start off the same way? It's an interesting question. And again, the answer lies in theory, that because we all have we all have the same beginnings, we may possibly have had similar or same ancestors. All right. And biochemical is our last word. Biochemical studies are refers to chemical reactions in living organisms. Turns out all living things on this planet utilize the same chemicals, right? I've told you guys before that your body is basically one big walking chemistry factory, right? Chemical reactions are happening all the time. You need them to survive. And every single thing on this planet that is alive requires the same chemical reactions to survive. Like you, a chimpanzee, your pet dog, a goldfish, even non-animal things, a plant, a banana. Well, bananas come from, I think, the trees. So the tree that is alive requires the exact same chemical reactions to survive. We have to take glucose. We need to break it open through cellular respiration in order to turn that energy into ATP, which is what we need in order to make our body functions work. Everything does that. So the question is, how do all of these strange, different things across the entire planet all need to do the exact same chemistry? And again, the theory is maybe we all have a similar or same ancestor. Right? The very first living thing, that's how they did it, and we all come from that first living thing. Possibilities. But like I said, those are theories based on these biochemical facts. All right, that was your last vocab word. Next time we are going to jump into the actual notes. So good luck. I will see you then.